right, Patricia. This is so cool being in Boulder with you. We're at the Shambhala Center in Boulder, and I had to twist your arm to get you to come here, didn't I?
It's so true. It's so true. I'm happy to be with you. On camera is a whole other thing.
Right. No, I can relate to that as well. So we have two who feel the same way. And so I guess first and foremost, what's it like being on the other side of the interview chair?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I'm going to let you know in about 20 minutes. I feel like I want to like turn the tables right away.
Yeah, right.
Right away. I'm holding
really,
myself back. Holding myself back.
You're going to have your practice of being able to be in a good, place is going to have to make sure you hold yourself back from asking me the questions. And I know at dinner, whenever we've had dinner a couple times, and I try to interview you during dinner, but you always turn the tables.
I think, though, we had dinner last night. I think I felt like I was talking quite a bit.
You were.
I was trying to get into practicing for the interview.
You were getting into the mode.
You're talking a lot, Patricia.
For sure. One of the first things I always like to talk about in the podcast is how really successful people like yourself get themselves set up for the day to be the best that they can be and show up in the world in a really great way. And so for me, it's do nothing, and that's my meditation practice every morning that really gets me in the right frame of mind. Everybody has seemingly something different. What's yours?
Mine is when I wake up, I sit up in bed and I meditate for 20 minutes. And mostly I do like a focused breath attention. But then at the end of it, I do a little bit of a gratitude practice, and I do a little bit of let me be the best expression of myself that I can be today. And then I do have some other sort of like intention setting that I do. And I just remind myself every day of who I want to be. I'm not always perfect, quite often not perfect, but it's good to remind myself that I want to be a certain way so that when I get into situations, I can remember that.
And so after the 20-minute meditation, how long are you doing the other things?
Just for like 5 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, that's really just very quick. It's like a reminder. It's like getting set in my day.
Do you go by feel on that particular morning in terms of what you're kind of putting into your brain, so to speak?
That's a really good question. I mean, just who I am is a lot about what I feel and my intuition and what comes to me. And so when I'm sitting in my meditation, there are some things that are routine, like, hoping or wishing that I'll be the best expression of myself that I can be, and hoping that I'll be loving and kind and brave and compassionate, and also wishing things for other people. I always like to do a practice that wishes that others don't suffer, and wishes for people to be healthy and live with ease, and that they be happy and free and love and be loved. So I sort of have some regular things that I do. And then I have moments where when I'm doing gratitude practice, I'll, think about the people that I'm grateful for today. And so that's different, right? Because that's based on what you're inspired by or what I'm inspired by in that moment in the morning or
the first part, which is it sort of like a loving kindness meditation that you're referring to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is. That's a loving kindness meditation starts off with, wishing love for yourself and then for people that you're close to, and sort of getting into that feeling and habit of wishing love, and then wishing love, as you know, for people that completely annoy you, make you angry.
Yes.
So that you can like really practice that. So I guess in a way it's a little bit like that. It's got elements of that, but I don't do it in any formal way. I really believe there's so many different kinds of meditation now. I think of, sometimes when I talk about meditation, I talk about it being like the word sport. There's soccer and there's football and there's baseball and there's golf. And meditation now, it's not just meditation. There are lots of different practices, different lineages. Even in Buddhism, there are so many different types of meditation. And there's transcendental meditation. And so I feel like I'm not really precious about meditation. When I'm doing my own meditation, I do like to do focused attention, breath meditation, because I feel like that's great for your brain and that's great mind training and it's great discipline. But the other things that I do are more like what will inspire me for my day. Mm-hmm. And I used to, when I was much younger, for many, many, many years, I would write in a journal. And I haven't been doing that as much lately. Every once in a while, I'll do that as I'll reflect. But so in my reflections in the morning, it'll often be like maybe what I would have written in my journal.
Mm. What led you to stop writing in the journal?
That's an interesting question. Because from the time I was maybe 12, I wrote in journals. And then I think one day, I have an apartment in New York that I've had for like 30 years, and I live in Boulder part-time. And I rent my New York apartment out. And I was cleaning things. I was purging. And I saw, like, in my closet and in my shelves and under the bed, like, there were, like, 50 journals. And I really started thinking, like, if I die tomorrow, like, who's in charge of throwing these journals out? And then I started looking through a few of them. I'm like, you're saying the same things over and over again. Oh,
that's amazing.
And so I'm going to keep, I don't even know how I chose, but I chose to keep like 8 of them. Mm-hmm. Out of the, like, it felt like there were hundreds. And then I just threw them out, which was this really interesting ritual to do that. But so anyway, after that, I was like, do you really need to keep writing more journals?
Because it's the same thing over and over again?
It did feel like that a little bit. It did feel like that. Now I do it every once in a while. Like the other day, I was hiking and then I stopped and wrote in a journal just to do some reflection. Mm-hmm. Writing is a very grounding practice for me. Mm-hmm. But that was a moment where I thought, I'm not sure that you need this every day the way you've needed it. So for me, it was always a way to express what I was unhappy about or frustrated or, just where my angst was. And that's what I reflected back on. Now I write more about what I'm grateful for and what I'm happy about. But it was just through all those years of going through your teenage years and then your 20s and 30s, they're hard. They're messy. And so those journals were just messy.
Mm-hmm. What exactly did you do in terms of throwing them out? Did you put them in a garbage can? Did you take them to a dumpster?
Oh, like did I burn them? Right. Like, was there a ritual? Like were they cremated and is there an urn or something in my apartment? And the answer is no. No, I think I just put them in the trash receptacle. I don't think I did any kind of ceremony. I think when I did it, I felt that I was done. That I was done. I didn't need to make it like a big thing. And I do make big deals out of things. Like when people or animals die, I'm very like heartbroken.
Yes.
But this, I was just like,
time. It was time. I'm always fascinated when somebody writes in a journal and they throw it away. If someone else, a stranger, found it and was reading your words and somehow connecting with them in some way, that could be happening, which would be crazy.
That would be funny.
I've also heard, I have journals as well, and I do wonder why I keep them. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately in terms of maybe I should just throw them away. I continue to write in a journal in the morning.
How many journals, do you write every day?
Yeah.
Every day you still write?
Yes, I do.
Now, have you told your wife to, if you die, to throw them out? Or is there, do you have any?
I just let her know there's journals. Do whatever you want with them. You guys can read them. I don't care.
Oh, okay, good. So you're like an open book.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, well, here you have a podcast, so of course you're an open book.
Of course.
So every day you write after you meditate?
I do, yep. I take about 5 minutes and I write down how I'm feeling in the morning and how did I sleep. I put a number to it, and then I write many things that I'm grateful for. I just try to go with a stream, a stream, and just be very grateful. And then what could make today great? And
you ask that question every morning.
Yeah.
What would make today great?
Yeah.
Do you answer it?
Yeah.
With what, like a real situation or just a word? Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So
What did you say this morning?
today I said a lot of presence and energy while I'm with you today.
Oh,
That would make today great.
awesome.
Yeah.
Good. How's
So
that
hopefully
going?
I'll come
How's
through.
that going?
You'll have to tell me
Okay.
after. So you actually grew up in New York,
I
even though
did.
you live part-time here now. Whereabouts in New York did you go? Were you in the city or?
I was in the suburbs of
In
New
the
York,
suburbs?
like 30
Okay.
minutes from New York City.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And what was the Karpas household
Oh
like?
God, let's
You,
not
you
go.
said you have a big family, right?
Well, it was a very big and complicated family. Like anytime I was ever dating someone, I needed like this big chart because
The organizational chart
my
for the
gosh.
family?
My parents were divorced when I was 10, but my parents had 5 children. My father remarried, and he and his wife together had 3 children.
Okay.
2 of hers, one that they had adopted together, and then my mother remarried, and they had 4 children
Okay.
later on. Like, no, he had 4 children. It was a very big family, like lots of
12. Is that right?
well, there was, let's just say 8, because the 4 that came, my mother and her husband, those 4 were his, and that was
Okay.
much later in life.
Okay.
So, but it's a
Got it.
complicated little story with just the 8.
Yep.
So there were, so there were kind of 2 families. One family that was split into 2
A modern
families.
family.
Yeah,
Before
but it was
modern
like
families
before,
were modern.
Yeah. I don't know. It was exactly as like quirky and fun as they make it on
As the television
TV.
show?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
So were
So-
you one of 5 then?
I was one of 5.
And
yeah.
where were you on the age?
So I have 2 older brothers. I was the firstborn daughter.
Okay.
And I have a younger sister and a younger brother.
Okay, so
Yeah.
right in the middle.
Right in the middle, but firstborn daughter.
Which
That-
meant?
Which, like, when you look at like the characteristics of like, I think I'm more of like I was like the apple of my father's eye, and it felt more like being the firstborn child in my family. It's just like a funny thing. Like they were just waiting for that girl, like that. So it's a lot of expectation.
I love it. I love it. And so who
Yeah.
did you live with once they were
My mother.
divorced? Your mother. And when my parents got divorced when I was 8.
Oh, okay.
What
I
what
didn't
was
know
the
that.
situation when they told you that they were getting divorced? Do you remember that?
We're going there. Okay. You know, I remember it was a really horrible time because I was so close to my father. And whenever there would be any conflict, I would always, like, my father and I would go for walks, and we would go for walks with my dog. And so when I was 10, my father and mother got divorced, and my dog died. And my grandmother, who was my other, like, big support person, died at that same time. So those 3 things happening at the same time were just very, like, with a 10-year-old kid, that's a really, like, I look now at my nieces and nephews, I'm like, that must have been a really hard thing to go through. So the experience for me was like just this, very kind of crushing, but I don't remember. I remember that being like very pivotal in my life, and being this kid who was like, what do you do with all of this, But I remember my father telling my younger brother, who is like my soul brother in life, he's 5 years younger than me, and we're just each other's like closest people in the world. Although I should say, like, now his wife and his kids, and we all just adore each other so much, but he and I like survived our situation together. But so I remember more my father telling him, and my father asking me to be there when he told Matthew.
And he was 5.
Matthew was 5 years old. Yeah, so I remember that more than I remember the moment when they told me. What was it like when your parents told you?
I just remember they brought us, my sister and I, she's 4 years younger, into the living room.
Oh,
and they
it was
just
a group thing.
It was all 4 of us.
Okay.
My mom, my dad, my sister, myself, and
Yeah.
they just said, we're getting divorced. And my dad said, I'm going to move out. I'll be around. I'll see you on weekends. And I'm not leaving, for a long time.
Yeah.
And that I remember, and I'm sure it didn't really work out this way, but what I remember is kind of saying, okay, are we good? Can I go outside and play baseball now?
Right.
Because I used to throw the
That's
ball
what kids
against the
do.
walls. So
They shut down. I
yeah,
think.
it might have been that. It might have been that. I don't think I really truly understood what was happening until he was gone.
Right.
And then he would come on weekends and things of that nature, and life was different.
Life is different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have somebody to talk to about it?
No. No. Did you?
This is what happens, I think. No, I didn't. And when I have 14 nieces and nephews, but I'm really, really close with Anna, who's 12. And I see each time she goes through something, how she's a very emotional person, human being. She's like a soul child. There's something very like deep and just like lovely about her. But I can see that she needs to talk about things. And she, and so I sort of relate to her sometimes. I'm like, gosh, like how is I, as a 10 or 12-year-old, without having anybody to talk to? She has my brother to talk to. Her mom is really very, verbal and expressive, and she has me that she can call anytime and just say, Auntie P, I'm feeling sad today. And
I feel like you would be the best aunt ever.
It's my favorite role in the entire world. My favorite role. But I see so much how kids like you and I, when we were 8 and 10, and needed that but didn't have it. And in some ways I think that's how we become so introspective.
Yeah, and, that's a great point.
Reflective and
I feel back then the world was different. In fact, your parents were probably ahead of the curve,
pioneers,
because I felt my
divorce.
Parents were
exactly.
I was one of the few that had parents who were divorced while I was in school. So I don't know that they really knew what to do.
Right. And my parents were not friends. They did not talk to each other for 25 years after the divorce. So they were mad at each other. And so that makes it even more difficult for a child, I think, in some ways, because there's so much animosity and that sort of negative energy that you're having to deal with a lot.
As you reflect, how was that? I always think like high school are the very formative years. How was that affecting you, or was it?
I think, and I have had this conversation with my brother, I think the way that it affected us both is that we had to suppress a lot of our feelings. And so I think we both were very functional and very, we did well in school and we had good relationships with kids. I don't think I had any of those effects, but I think I was wounded. It's like you have these wounds from not being able to express your feelings and from keeping them down. And this gets back to, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, like how helpful meditation can be. I think for children, I really care a lot about kids learning resilience and having like a toolbox to deal with their emotional range, because I think for me, I didn't have that at all, which is why I started writing in a journal, and why the journal was always, here's what I feel. It's why it's so boring. But you don't have somebody to play back those feelings with. So, that's something that you have to, as an adult, kind of go back and reclaim your feelings, that range of feelings that you...
So in a sense, you were carrying some things on the inside, but were you like a chameleon on the outside in a way? Were you... Like, did it seem everything was fine with you from the people in your life? Just seemed like everything was good.
Like I was very much of a people pleaser.
Okay.
Someone I interviewed, Dina Kaplan, who's in New York, and she's an entrepreneur, and she's lovely. And when I interviewed her, she said, I spent my whole life optimizing for popularity. And I don't think I did that, but I certainly think like when when you don't know yourself well, you tend to want other people to validate you. And so, I think I made a lot of choices as a young person and a young adult because I wanted to do the right thing and I wanted to be loved and, some of those things. Was it like that for you, or?
I think I was a bit of, I had a definite rebellious streak.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, no doubt. And I wanted to ask you, was there any rebellious streak in you at all?
My rebellious streak was, this marriage thing looks horrible.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I think that you can be much happier without all, this is very complicated, very messy, very, you have parents get divorced, never talk to each other. It's like, why bother? So I never was on that path for looking at marriage as being something that I wanted. My sister, on the other hand, was the opposite direction, because she went down this path thinking she can do this better. I was like, I don't even want to try. This just looks so bad. But, you know, we all like react in different ways to that.
Yeah. How did that affect any relationships that you had, like with boyfriends and things like that in high school or in college or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I always was, you know, I always love very deeply, but I don't make, like, I'm not someone that's, like, gets into a relationship thinking, I want to be with you for the next 30 or 40 years. Of course, I'll be dead by then. But
maybe you won't. We talked about that at dinner.
No, that's why I brought it up. But you went the opposite direction because you married your college sweetheart.
Yeah.
So totally different.
Well,
so you must have believed that there was something right about marriage and family.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was, I definitely picked up on, and I had, you know, mentors, so to speak. My best friend, Joel, my business partner, his parents were great mentors. My mom got remarried. She's still married. And so she was a great mentor. And I think what I learned about everything with my mom and my dad is, you know, kind of the what does work and what doesn't, and the commitment that you have to make to marriage if you're going to do it.
Well, that really worked for you.
Yeah, it was, I think we see mentors, and I learned this, as somebody said it very eloquently in an interview that I did recently, in that we all have mentors, and some of them teach us positive traits, and some of them teach us not as positive traits that we realize we don't want. Yeah. And so I thought those were wise words.
Those are wise words. I think that's really true.
And so you were a good student, and then you came out to college in Boulder at the University of Colorado, right?
I did, yeah.
So what brought you out here, being from New York, all the East Coast schools? Had you been out to Colorado before?
I hadn't. And I had actually gone to school first in New York to Ithaca, but I went to a college in London, and over the summer, so this was like sophomore year, I went with my best friend. We traveled all over Europe, and we were in Greece, and we were atop of a mountain in Crete, and I was like, I'm never going back. I'm never going back to New York or back to the United States. This is so beautiful, and this is the way I want to live, and who needs all that, like, conformity, and life could be so great. And I wrote my parents a letter. I'm like, I'm not going back to college, and it's so beautiful here. I'm just going to stay. And they were like, we don't think so. You're going to college. I'm like, well, I'm going to college. I'm going to go where my best friend goes. I mean, this is like ridiculous now when I look back at this, but she was going to the University of Colorado. So I was like, I'll just go there. And that was sort of the beginning of my love affair with the mountains and with Colorado. And it turned out to be really great, but it wasn't a thoughtful process to get there. I hate to say. Yeah.
Did your parents, were they supportive of you coming out here?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so,
I mean, they always looked to me as the adult, I have to say. Like, this was one of these families where, you know, I helped my father before he got remarried. I was sort of his person, and I was my mother's best friend. You know, I was kind of the grown up, and I took care of my younger brother, the one that was 5. I sort of raised him in a way because my mother wasn't able to, because she was very unhappy after the divorce, and so I feel like I was a lot of a grown-up as a kid, and so that was, you know, so when I made the most of the decisions, except they weren't allowing me to make the decision not to go to college, but I was making a lot of my own sort of grown-up decisions. I was like a pretend grown-up for sure, very early on.
Okay. Yeah. And the half brothers or sisters or sisters that you have, were you able to be close with them? Or?
I am close with them. Yeah.
And so you still stay in touch, and these nieces and nephews that you have, are they part of the?
It's pretty good now.
Are most of them in New York?
Some are in Denver, most are in New York, some are in North Carolina. They're all over, or Connecticut.
Wow. Or Connecticut. Okay. And so now you're spending half your time in New York, and when you're there, is it just a whirlwind of busyness with the family?
Well, it's not a whirlwind, but there's you know, everybody's so busy, but it's definitely like lots of like fill up your love bucket for sure. Yes. Still have my stepmother there. I have some of my stepbrothers and sisters, but then my younger brother lives in Connecticut with his wife and 2 daughters, and they're my heart tribe. They're my, you know,
That's who you got to see.
I got to see that. Yeah. No question.
That's so cool. So once you got out here with your best friend and you started going to the University of Colorado, would you say instantly you felt like you were in a place that you needed to be?
I don't know if I felt like that, because remember, I just come from like Europe and traveling around, being independent and falling in love with all these beautiful countries. But I definitely felt like I was where I needed to be then. And that was great, a great period in my life, and it steered me in one direction. I mean, at that time, I thought I would be a social worker, because I had this very much of this like wanting to save the world, wanting to have an impact, wanting to save people, wanting to save myself, this whole wanting to be really socially responsible as a human being. But then I started, so I did that for my undergraduate.
Yep.
And then I shifted into business, because I realized that as a young woman, if I didn't want to like get married in my 20s or maybe even my 30s, then I wanted to be able to support myself. So it was like, I'm going to get my business degree. And so, yeah.
And you stayed out here and you did that at the University of Denver.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And were you still in Boulder at that time?
Yeah, I commuted. But then I moved to Denver because my first job after getting my MBA was in Denver. So I went there.
Okay.
And then moved to New York City to start up CNBC, the Business News Network.
Okay.
So that was that.
So before that happened, though, I'm curious what Boulder was like when you were, kind of finishing undergrad and then doing your MBA, sort of getting more into your adult years. Obviously, it's so different today.
Today.
What was it like?
Yeah, I think when you're a student here, you see it completely differently. So for me, it was like a place to live, and there were lots of young people, and everybody was having a good time, and it was very outdoorsy. And Denver was more of that city that if you want to do anything culturally or otherwise, or even like more industry for jobs, and the cable industry was really big in Denver, which is where I gravitated to. That was what it was like. I didn't like today. Boulder is very much a high tech community, lots of venture capital. It's very urban, not compared to New York City, but there's a lot of cultural things that are going on at the university, and there are a lot of organizations that have started bringing more like comedy and dance and theater and music to the city. And I wasn't involved in any of that when I was here, when I was younger. It was more just that, sort of college life.
So your first job was in Denver?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the cable industry?
It was.
And what were you doing?
There was, I did an internship when I was finishing my MBA. I did an internship at a company that was acquired by Time Warner. So it was Denver was a cable capital. So it had lots of like companies like TCI and Daniels and ATC. They were all, it's really, they've all been consolidated over the years for the most part. And now they're either like Comcast or.
Right.
But at that time, ATC, the company I was working for, had cable systems all over the country, and I was working for them. And then they were acquired by Time Warner, and so then I had the opportunity to either go back to Connecticut or to do, to make, stay in Denver.
Yeah.
But one of the guys that was moving back to Connecticut connected me with the person that ended up being the CEO of CNBC, which was an NBC company. And I went back and started running their marketing program.
Was that something that you
really
had
fun.
to give much thought to? Or were you, being from here, maybe the pace is a bit different, especially at that time? And then going to New York? Where...
No, I don't think so. I had done this book. I did this book. There's a book that I used when I was 22 called Wishcraft. This is sort of like your visioning thing that you do a little bit. And I went into the mountains by myself for a weekend, and this book was by a woman named Barbara Scher, and I went through the entire book, and at the end of it, I was like, I need to be in the media business doing marketing for a company that's either in news or entertainment. And it was just like, I was directed, and that's really what I ended up doing. It was crazy. And when I moved back to New York, so when that opportunity came at CNBC, Business News Network, starting it up, part of NBC. You know, it was obvious that was what I needed to do. And I called the author of the book Wishcraft, and because she was in New York, and I said, thank you. This has been amazing. And it's because of you that I have so much clarity about what I'm doing. And she said, well, I've got another book. Would you like to read the manuscript for me?
Wow.
And so I went to her apartment, and she gave me the manuscript, and I met her son. But it was like a really, like, I hadn't thought about that in a while, but that was a very clarifying moment. So each of the choices I made after that, I have trouble making decisions on a lot of things, but not that at all. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I didn't labor over those career choices.
It's amazing clarity that you had at that age. And the book helped bring that out. Yeah,
it was sort of, I guess what came later was like a what color is your parachute, but this one seemed to have a lot of heart. And I always would put this pie chart, you know, the pie chart of your life, like here's your emotional life and your family life and your work life and your, you know, and it's like, because I came very much from my head. Mm-hmm. I was very, you know, wired, like we've talked about, wired to ask questions and wired to want to understand things and thinking that there's a right way to do things. And so I did all of that like I was, you know, being very analytical, but it also brought my heart to the table too, which is what I really loved about her book. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. I don't even know if it's still in print, but it was really good.
It just goes to show you what you had in you at such an early age to call the author and end up at her apartment reading the manuscript for the next book.
I didn't even think about that.
It's pretty remarkable. I mean, really.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it has to do with...
Who's got the guts to do that? Not many.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah.
She just had such a big impact. Sometimes I think you don't realize how, you know, people don't realize often how much of an impact they have on you, or maybe even you have on them. One of my very, very dear friends died in 9/11, and I was heartbroken, but I remember someone said at his memorial service, it's like that they didn't think he ever really knew how great he was. Like, so many people he was like 44, he hadn't been married yet. I really, really adored him, and he was such a great guy. And when someone said that at his memorial service, I was like, wow, you know, we live our lives like nobody tells you how great you are until you're memorial service, and then you're not even, maybe you're around to hear it, but maybe you're not. Mm-hmm. And so what have we told people? I don't know. I didn't have that when I called Barbara Scher, but now that we're having this conversation, I'm like, I should tell people the impact that they have on me, and we should do that with each other more. Let's do that.
Around that, yeah, I think that's a great idea, actually. It makes me think, you know, like around that age, who were the people that you could call and say, you know, you had a real impact on me?
I know.
Who? Can you think of others?
Yeah, like my first boss. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was...
The Denver boss? Or
the Denver boss. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, actually, the New York boss at that time wasn't someone that I would...
You would not... That would not be a call that would be made. Okay.
But the Denver boss was kind of amazing to have your first boss be probably the kind of boss that you are, because you've done so much great work in your organization and as a leader, and listening to people and helping them feel confident so that they're really a part of the organization. He did all of those things very naturally back then.
I interviewed a guy by the name of Jack Stack last week, and he's kind of the, somebody who brought open book finance to the forefront of business. And he was telling me about his first boss, and he said he's a firm believer that your first boss makes the biggest impact in how you move forward in your business career.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it doesn't mean that they were a great boss. He just said they have that much of an impact. So I thought that was an interesting perspective. I'm glad you had a positive situation, and he was helpful in getting you to New York.
He wasn't the one that got me to New York, but someone else that was at that same
Who
company.
knew the CEO
of CNBC.
CNBC.
Yeah.
Okay. So you pick up and you're back in New York, you're home. And you're in the city, or
I'm in the
you're
city.
young, and I'm sure
young,
you're in the media business.
I
picture
know,
a
it was so
high-flying
great.
Patricia,
It
just like
actually
on the go,
was.
making deals.
You know what? Those were like the days of like big entertainment budgets,
Right.
and we were part of NBC, so we went to, Super Bowl with the VIP lounges and the Barcelona Olympics, which was like dreamy. You're like on a ship. Oh, and I remember like there were some private jets. It was just, those were the days. Like, it's very different from being an entrepreneur
Can
now.
you believe
you're
at a point? Can you believe you're at a point where you're saying those were the days? I say that sometimes too. I'm like, really? I'm saying that now?
These are the days too.
They're just different kind of
They're
days.
just
right?
different kind of days. I mean, those were very boondoggly days. I mean, I worked at NBC for 11 years. Those were very boondoggly days. And kind of I worked at AOL after that. And, there was like that private jet that went back and forth between New York and DC. And, you just have this perspective that in some ways you're on top of the world and you're having a great time. And then it's also very complicated, very difficult. And you're dealing with very difficult people who see the world in one way often, and you're dealing with lots of different bosses in your career. And so there's lots that I know now from life and experience, and my friend who just wrote a book about all of this, that I did not know then, about dealing with those situations. So the fun times were really great. But I also didn't really have the tools to deal with some of the things that, I wish I did have the tools for.
A couple of things I'm curious about. One being, did you have the energy to run at that pace? Were you that kind of person? Okay,
I definitely,
so you
I'm a
enjoyed...
very, yes. I mean, I'm type A in some ways, not so much anymore, but I was definitely someone that could work till 8 or 9 at night and could travel a lot and could do all of those things.
Did you, in a sense, was it like something that the excitement just kept you going? Was that part of it, like an endorphin rush or something?
Yeah, maybe it's the excitement, but you're in a very cool industry. I mean, it was a very fun industry, and my roles were always starting things up. So it's funny now being an entrepreneur, because when I worked at CNBC, yes, it was part of NBC, but I was the 4th employee and we were building it. And we launched it the day it aired in October of 1988. They forgot to put the second line of the ticker on. I mean, it was very new and very, learning things as you go. And then when I went to NBC, we started up NBC Digital. It was always very exciting, because you're in these companies that have the budgets and the resources to build businesses. So you have everything you need to do these things. And I could always be in really creative roles to help build these businesses.
Were you
really fun.
Were you ever struggling emotionally during those times? Were there things that...
Oh, never.
Never. Well, I wondered if you even had time to,
No, I mean, I was always, there was always this part of me that was like, should I be focusing on my personal life more? And so I did struggle with that. And a lot of the women, I think I was telling you this last night, in my generation, a lot of us were kind of forging new ground and taking executive roles in some of these more traditional media companies. And it was hard. And I think that's why a lot of us either didn't get married or got married later, because we felt like we always had to do one thing. You couldn't, get married, have kids, and still be on this corporate track to be a vice president or whatever senior position you were looking for. I mean, that was just the mindset then. And, So, I mean, that was complicated. And I think that was emotionally challenging for me. But at the same time, because of my upbringing, I was like, this is what I want to be doing. I want to be, I want to be the master of my own life. And I want to have jobs that I love. And I want to be doing work in the world that I love. And that was always the bigger priority for me.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever a time or a period, say maybe in your 30s or whatnot, where you started to just really question things at all? Or did it always... Go ahead.
Rob doesn't get personal at all. Yes. Yeah, I mean, there were a few really difficult times, which one is in my 30s when I went to learn meditation because I really felt like I needed that tool. I was like sort of flying without, what's the term? I was like sailing without a rudder or something. Like I just felt like I needed some more grounding. So I learned meditation, and then it was almost like clockwork. When I was like 39 or 40, I'm like, oh my gosh, I should adopt a child. And I, that was the process when I started really thinking and exploring all of that. So those were like sort of my emotional pivot points where.
Okay, so in your early 30s, how are you even thinking about meditation?
Well, this was late. Oh, early 30s. I don't think I was thinking about meditation. I was just having a good time.
No.
Late
Okay, in your later 30s.
Late 30s.
I misunderstood.
Yeah. So I had sort of like a breakup with this boyfriend, and I was working really hard, and I just felt like I needed that grounding. And so I went up to a retreat center called Omega. It's not really a retreat center. It's like a personal growth institute.
It's in upstate New York, right?
It's in Rhinebeck. And I went there and I learned meditation from a Sri Lankan monk. And I got there on a Friday, and I think I might have cried all weekend because we were in silence a lot. And then we were doing chanting, and I was just like, this is a lot of time just to be with me. And I was also dealing with the breakup, and I was like, oh. And I remember we got to have some private time with him, and he, I was like, I don't really want to be crying anymore. He's like, just, be with it. And, and so I went back to New York, to the city afterwards, and I felt like I had this new tool, which was a different kind of meditation than I do now, but it was so helpful. And I for years and years and years, I always was grateful for this Bhante Wamala, I think was his name, this Sri Lankan monk. And I was always really, really grateful to him for being like my first teacher of meditation.
You know where he is?
Well, I did. I think he's in Pennsylvania somewhere, but he came to teach in New York, and I went like just even like a couple of years ago, and I was like hoping he would remember me. How egoist that he didn't.
Why, you don't remember
me?
me?
When someone's so important to you,
right.
and you're like one of thousands of people along the way, and it's like how many years ago? And he definitely did not. But it was nice to like see him, and he had a book, and I bought his book, and so that was all really fun.
Did you have an opportunity to share with him the impact he had made on you?
I told him. Yes, I told him how grateful I was, and I thanked him for that. Yeah.
How was that?
I mean, it was just a moment. But it was nice to be able to do that, to sort of maybe even close that loop a little bit or something. Yeah, but that was great.
How did you even know about this Omega in upstate New York, and what meditation was? I mean, how did you know about these things?
Well, so I also, when I was an undergraduate, I studied philosophy, and along with social work, and I always read a lot of these books. And later on, I studied Pema Chodron, but I was somebody that always asked a lot of questions. I was just wired for that. And so I was reading all of these Buddhist books. I was reading like Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield, and I wasn't reading Eckhart Tolle. Like, I've interviewed a lot of people who have told me that Eckhart was their first entry into this. I think some people have a book, like someone might say to you, have you read this book? And you're like, no, but you get the book and you're like, oh, this is it. So I think that I was just always primed for that. And reading a lot of books. Did you have a first?
Wise Heart was mine by Jack Kornfield.
Yeah. There you go.
That was it.
It's just one, like, it's like a tipping point or something.
It's pretty amazing when you think about the way I look at it is it's just words on paper, and you're just sitting there sort of absorbing it, and it can just shift your whole life. Just these words.
And then you have to decide in a way. You either wait to see what happens next, or you decide what you want to do with that. And I think I started going to like Insight Meditation Center and Shambhala. Like I think I started going and just like listening to people talk. But I always felt like when I went back to my office at Rockefeller Center in New York City, and I would like, there would be like Katie Couric or these people, and I felt like I was this closet meditator because people weren't talking about it then. So I felt like I was always sort of like secretly trying to understand myself and the world and how everything, all the pieces fit together.
Were you concerned that they would judge you?
I don't even think I thought, well, yeah, maybe that was it. I mean, I don't know if it was that, like I really articulated that, but I didn't want to be seen as a woo-woo person. Yeah. I was a very like serious business person, and certainly as a woman, like I love that women can go to work now and be all of who they are. You can be a mom, you can be a meditator, you can be a yogi, and you can be the best business person on the planet. You know, you can just bring all of yourself. I don't feel like I was ever able to do that in my 30s and 40s even.
I mean, there's an evolution that's taking place.
Yeah, which is so great.
Too late, but nonetheless, it's happening. We're keeping that. She spilled all over herself.
You cannot. So
you're not going to make me cut that out.
Where's the video person to?
You were getting excited.
I have water all over my face.
You're getting excited. It's a new era.
It's fizzy water.
Right.
All right. Is it on my face?
No. Actually, it looks great. It's like it never happened.
Well, I hope it will be like it never happened. Dear editor.
You're gonna. You and I are gonna have a conversation later, and you're gonna make me edit it out, and I'm gonna beg you to not make me do it, and then you'll get your way. I know how you work.
I love that.
I already know how you work.
It doesn't happen in life that much that I get my way, so I'm going with it.
I just think that it's so interesting that you. Let me back up for a second before I say this. Okay. When you were growing up, was your household religious in any way?
Oh, that's a good question. No, my mother was not religious at all. My father was Reformed Jewish. And so we would go to services on like high holy days, but we weren't really strong practicing.
Did
Jews.
You have a bat mitzvah?
I didn't. I was confirmed, which is another kind of tradition. Okay. But I wasn't. But my niece just was. You know, most of the nieces and nephews in my family have not been, but some have been. But yeah. Okay. We were not.
So that brings me back to how you got into meditation and interested in it. Was there anything that you picked up on during your time here in Boulder when you were in school or working in Denver where you got, exposed to it?
No. Not so much meditation then. And I think let me reel back a second. My boyfriend and I, when I was 18, we went to do transcendental meditation together. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I didn't continue with that for one reason. It's a really bad reason, but you're not supposed to share your mantra. They make you feel like it's the most sacred thing, and that everybody gets their own personal mantra. And so my boyfriend and I shared our mantra.
And you felt...
and they were the same. So we're like, that doesn't work for me. How can I trust a practice that gives me the same meditation mantra as my boyfriend?
I'm out. I'm not doing... I'm sorry, TM, I'm out. And
that's what happened.
So, but
let me just say that a lot of people love TM.
Yeah. Oh,
so
absolutely.
We'll just say that.
Yes,
that was a bad experience for me.
It's just your experience.
My experience.
Yeah. It's your journey. Exactly. So, but did somebody in New York then? Was there an influential person? Was there something you read? How did you think this might be useful for me? I'm struggling.
Yeah. That is a really good question. I think it was like a lead up from all the books that I had been reading. Mm-hmm. And I had gone to some like personal growth workshops. Okay.
Were you under the radar with that as well?
Totally. Yes. Yes. I did have, like, one of my best friends was always a little bit more of a hippie than me.
Okay.
And so she was very much into a lot of this.
Is this a New York best friend?
Yeah, one of my New York best friends. Yeah. And so were my work friends at all the companies. I can't think of any work friends or any work mentors that meditated or did anything to do, or even yoga. Like, I didn't even start yoga till my early 40s, and then I was like 100% committed to that too. And a lot of people come into their meditation practice from having an experience with shavasana, which is the last practice that you do in a yoga class, when you lie on your back and you close your eyes, and it's a kind of meditation. That wasn't my story, but I find that really, that's something that does trigger people to want to try meditation or get more deeply into it.
Yeah. So once you went to Omega and you started this exploration, sort of a new part of your journey as I see it.
Yeah.
When did you take on more of a regular practice? Did you start doing it?
I started doing it then,
yeah. Okay.
But because that meditation was what I learned later was the Heart Sutra. It's sort of a chant that you do that starts with like Gate, Gate, Paragate. That was the Sri Lankan monks. That is what he taught us. And so my meditation would be focusing on that chant that I had memorized inside. Not on my breath yet, not on my TM mantra anymore, but on this one chanting. So I could do that wherever I was. And so I would be in the subway, or I would be walking to work, or I would be like in a difficult conversation with someone and go back to my office, and I would do this Heart Sutra meditation. And so that was how I integrated it into my world. And then with yoga, I started doing more and more, but that was really, I had that first practice really integrated into my life. It wasn't like I was sitting for an hour in the morning or an hour at night or 20 minutes even. I would do that every once in a while, but I took that chant with me wherever I needed it.
Did you start to notice a difference in the way you were interacting with people at work, or just even just in life?
Definitely. I mean, I think I was more relaxed. I remember when you have a hard time expressing yourself, I'll say it for myself. When I have a hard time expressing myself, I get very frustrated, and I'll often say things that it's like, that's not what I meant to say, because I don't take the time to articulate what it is that I think would have the most impact and be the most productive thing to say. And I think I was like that. I was very quick to respond or react to things. And I also wanted to be right. Like, I needed that validation, and you don't learn until you start practicing some of these principles that, sometimes it's better to give up being right. It's not like the most important thing in the world. And so for me, it was like learning all of those tools, which are more mindfulness tools. We learned that a lot from reading books. And then I went to Pema Chodron's, like, after I did the Sri Lankan monks program, I went to 4 or 5 of Pema Chodron's workshops, like just weekend. She's a Buddhist nun, and she has I've read every one of her books. Like, she became my teacher, and she makes things very mainstream and very accessible. And she speaks from her heart. She's very emotional. She talks about her real life a lot. And so I think a lot of people gravitated towards her and her teaching. It made a lot of those Buddhist principles, and I think even, the mindfulness principles that came out of some of the Buddhist principles, very accessible. So that became my my teaching. And this idea of responding versus reacting, like, she talks about some of these teachings. There's this term she uses called, it's a Buddhist term called Shempa. Do you know Shempa?
No.
Like, Shempa is when something hooks you. And so we talk about that in our language as when you get triggered. Like, you feel it immediately. When somebody triggers you, you feel it immediately. And then there are the kleshas. And the kleshas are like, it's like somebody hooks you, and then you're on the river, and you're just like, it's just this force of, like, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And she has this way of talking about getting hooked and then what you do with that getting hooked energy so you don't keep going down that, crazy path of angst and frustration and anger. So just having those tools and being able to pause, breathe, and respond, I think it just changed the way I thought about work and business and people. So it was super helpful for me.
Did any coworker ever or person in your life ever say something to you like, you've changed or something?
No, I know that's happened with you.
Things like that?
No. I mean, I think
you just knew.
I knew because a lot of it was on the inside, and I wasn't like a crazy reacting person. In fact, I think I had a hard time expressing myself. And there was, I had this one boss who was very command and control. And that was I'm very conflict averse, and I have a hard time expressing myself. And when somebody comes at me, I'm like that amygdala that gets triggered, that fight, flight, freeze. I'm like frozen. And I remember saying to a colleague of mine that I really liked at HBO, he was such a great guy, and I said, I'm really having a hard time with this guy's management style. And he said, the only way you can really understand Kevin is to get this book. It's called The Marine's Guide to Military Management. And
wow,
understanding that control. What this other guy was saying to me was, everybody's got a different style, and you have to adapt to their style. Now, today, if somebody came to me in that situation, I would say those are your choices. You either adapt to that person's style, or you find someone that you'd rather work with. I didn't feel like I had the control. There were still good things about that, but I think part of what you learn through your mindfulness practice is to be a better witness to what's happening and to make choices. You can still make a choice to stay in a situation which might be not ideal for you, but at least you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And those are great tools to be able to have, I think.
Yeah. When you ended up leaving New York and coming back to Boulder to work for Gaia.
Yeah,
right?
I didn't actually leave. I was still doing both, but yes.
Okay.
I was like going back and forth.
Okay.
Still. Yeah.
So you were partially with Gaia and partially...
I was consulting with Gaia when I first started.
Okay.
And so I was living part-time in Boulder and then going part-time back to New York. And that pretty much continued the whole time, even when I went full-time with Gaia for a couple of years. Then I started consulting with them again, which is where we incubated Meditation Studio. But yeah, I came back here and I thought maybe I would like a life that is a little more connected to nature, because New York is not like that, but I still love the New York energy. So I'm always like, between two forces.
Right. So when that opportunity presented itself, were you excited? Because not only was it in this area, which has the mountains and all the different kind of energy that you were talking about, but it also was a different kind of company, at least from my perspective, than what you had been used to for many years in your career.
Well, things aren't always as they seem. That's another lesson. But it was exactly the right thing for me to be doing, because a few years earlier, it was actually when I turned 50, I saw this great executive coach, and we focused so much on recalibrating to be more about who you wanted to be in the world versus what you were doing. And my whole generation and maybe the generation after me too, like we grew up thinking, here's what we have to do. We have to do this. And it wasn't so much about who do I want to be as a human being.
Yes.
And so I was like shifting there. So I was moving from entertainment and business in all of my, in the media industry to I was making this commitment to health and wellness and wanting to have a really positive impact. So I started, I got my yoga teacher training, I studied nutrition and got my health coaching degree, and I studied meditation and mindfulness, and I just started learning as much as I could about all of that. And then I was starting nonprofit because I wanted to have more of a social impact. And so, it was kind of cobbling together all these pieces of my life that I wanted to ultimately bring forth. And so I started doing a lot of consulting with companies around health and wellness, and that's when I got to Gaiam. So when I actually came out here and started working for Gaiam, it very much felt like the right thing. You learn this, that people are imperfect wherever you go. So this sort of illusion that if somebody's in the yoga industry or the mindfulness industry, that their business practices are going to be great is a little bit of a myth. And I think it's really important to understand that like you can have amazing people in a printing company or a media company. It doesn't have to be a meditation company, or
right.
You like ideally you bring who you are to whatever business that you choose to be in.
That's great perspective. Yeah. And as you're going through this part of the journey with Gaiam, this whole thing happens with you're incubating the meditation app. When that was going on, was there any point where you stopped for a minute and said to yourself, wow, I'm getting into like a meditation business?
I know.
And I was
crazy.
like a closet meditator not that long ago.
Yeah. No, I felt that way when I first came out. I'm like, I cannot believe I'm doing something in yoga and meditation.
Yeah.
And that they're asking me to do a buy versus build decision on a yoga app. I'm like, that's crazy. Like, yeah. And then each time my business partner is really amazing in her, she was Sid Krause.
Yeah.
She was the COO of Gaiam at the time, and I was consulting with her as we were doing all of these buy versus build, and then we were building meditation studio. And each time she would say to me, let's do this, or let's find like the best teachers and create like 20 meditations on stress and anxiety, and let's have them all be 5 minutes. And so it'd be like, okay, how am I going to do that? Like, that wasn't something I had actually done. And I just figured out, you figure out how to do things. And she was like, why don't let's start a podcast. And we interviewed a bunch of hosts for it. And I was like, oh, maybe I should do that. Maybe I like, that was sort of my little secret dream. I wanted to tell other people's stories about the impact that they were having. Like, that's what we just talked about. Like, what impact are you having? And so that's how it was just, each thing was like, okay, I can do that. I'll just try. And we built this app on those like beginnings of let's just figure out how to do this. And it just kept growing and growing, and we kept bringing on more teachers, and all of the teachers, honestly, sometimes, and I feel like this now, I feel like we're in a therapy session or something. And I feel like my life is like a therapy session, because I'm scouting teachers all the time, and I'm interviewing people, and I'm asking the questions that I have. And when I get on a call with somebody, I'm like, we're doing a relationship collection. And so I want to learn like how to have a difficult conversation, how to express myself, how to forgive and let go, how to get unstuck. Like, we're doing a leadership collection. How do we, have empathy in the workplace? It's like I get to have all my questions in life answered.
So great.
I hope that's not selfish, but like I hope other people have the same question.
Your curiosity is serving the world.
I hope so.
Really?
But that's sort of the evolution of how that business went.
And at a certain point, Gaiam was going through a private equity sale.
Gaiam was going through a private equity sale,
and they didn't want the private equity company wanted to not be involved with the app or something.
They were focused mostly on product, so they were interested in the yoga mats and the yoga clothing, and so we had the opportunity to take it off on our own.
Were you excited?
Again,
I'm thinking,
it was a difficult time.
Now I get to have. Now I'm going to be
you're the co-founder of a meditation app that you actually built inside of this company.
Yeah.
I mean, Sid and I really did build it with this a small team of people, but and now we were entrepreneurs, and it was a difficult time because we acquired the app in early September. And her mom died end of September, so she was out. She was very devastated. It was a really difficult time, heartbroken, and she had been dealing with that for quite a long time. So we were, I was trying to kind of hold it together. She's much more like, we're very complementary as business partners, because she's a technology person and she's finance and operations, and I'm more content, community, talent, marketing. I'm sort of focused on a lot of the more creative areas. And so, but this was like a pause time, even though we had just acquired it. And then all of a sudden, it was hard. It was, I was sort of wondering how we're going to do this. She was wondering if she was ever going to not feel sad again. You're sort of going, and then her father-in-law died. Like, she just had, it was like within a 3-month period, it was like she was dealing with a lot of grief. And then, it was late November, and it was 6:00 in the morning, and she texted me from her, I don't remember where she was, and Apple had just named, it was like the end of 2016, and they had just named us one of the top 10 apps of the year. And we were like, she's like, can you check to see if you see the same thing that I'm seeing? And we were like, it was sort of like being giddy. Like, we're like, what does that mean? Like, how do they just pick us as a top 10 app? Like, is it in the health category? Is it? And it was of all the apps of like hundreds of thousands of apps. And we were just like flabbergasted and overwhelmed.
They didn't send you a note or anything. Say, hey, good news. Just want to let you know.
Same day that it came out.
Then they do that.
Then you get this email saying congratulations, and here's your little moniker to put on your social media and let people know, and congratulations. And but we were just like, it was just like the craziest moment, but it was exactly what we needed from the universe to know that we could keep going, because we were in a it was hard to build the business. We didn't have, it's not like we automatically had budgets or we were paying ourselves, but we had this company that we loved. We had this product that we loved. We had the content that we loved. But we hadn't really gotten our heads around how we were going to do this.
Right.
And then we had all this sad energy.
Right.
And then this happened. And it really, that we should tell Apple, like, thank you so much, because it's because of you that we got a little wind behind our sails. I mean, they know they have huge impact on businesses, but they really had a huge impact on us emotionally. We really were so like grateful and shocked, like, and we didn't it's amazing.
Like, there's some number of people that must be behind this, how they choose these apps. How cool would it be to find out and say, I want to explain something to you?
Well, we always knew that, like, they had some people on their editorial staff that really loved us. And I think we have the kind of teachers that you can fall in love with. It's a little bit different than some of the other apps, like even a Headspace. It's very teaching, and it's one person. Like, and nothing bad about that. I think they've done like a brilliant job. But we have these, I don't know there's something about our teachers. They're doing what they care about, and I think that comes through. So for people that get that, and we're still, we're a small company, but for people that get what it is we're trying to give, I think it has that impact. And I think we had some people inside of the Apple team that felt that way.
Coming from corporate, even at Gaiam, and then all of a sudden and I know you've kind of started things up from within. But, at the end of the day, it's not on your shoulders per se. In other words, if you leave, they still keep going. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course. So now you're dispensable.
Yeah, right? And now here you're coming out, and it's you and it's Sid. And were you scared?
Well, I was excited. I must say I was more excited than I was scared. I mean, I didn't have that much to lose, and I was doing what I loved, and I was at the stage where I really wanted to be doing what I loved, and I could do it. Like, I could wake up at 6:00, meditate, and put my computer on my lap in my bed and do my work. I didn't have to spend a lot of money on clothes and go out and work in an office. So that I loved it. I don't think I was scared. I think what happens with a business like this, where at the time we were not subscription, we were $3.99 to download the app, and every day you look at your numbers, and it's the same as for people like that get on a scale and you weigh 5 pounds more and 5 pounds less, and it affects your mood. It's like, and you can't, it's really hard not to take it personally. And so I did feel a lot like I was, I was in a good mood when we had great numbers. And then I was like, oh, how are we going to, yeah. So it was like more of an emotional part ego and just like an emotional roller coaster in that way.
And so how did you learn to deal with that, and was your practice helpful?
Well, part of learning to deal with it is seeing that the business is cyclical and like sort of dreams about a business being viral and just taking off. It's like really, really hard to make that happen, especially without like marketing budgets and PR teams and all, so part of it was acknowledging the reality of the business that we were in. It was very competitive. We didn't have resources, so it was really hard. And a lot of what my mindfulness practice is about is accepting things as they are and being present with what is, but at the same time trying to do your absolute best. And what does it mean to do your absolute best when you're running a business? Is it about how hard you work, or is it about how smart you work, or is it about how well you work with like freelancers? Or there are times where you feel very torn. Like I could spend 5 days trying to cultivate business partnerships and get nothing from that. Like you don't get any immediate like feel good, like if your numbers aren't good and certain business partnerships that you're trying to do take a long time to cultivate, you don't get a lot of like good feedback. So you have to really learn to know that it's a marathon.
Yeah,
there's a lot of sprints in there, but it's a marathon, and that things do go up and down. And I feel like if the core's there, you're doing business you love and you really love your business partner or the people that you're working with, and there's always a lot more like hope and potential and possibility that can ignite that spirit.
How many years has it been so far?
Well, we took it over 2016, so that's been 2 years.
2 years. So now you have a chance to reflect, but when you were in it, what you talk about looking at the numbers and feeling bad and things of that nature,
or happy and bad. Happy.
Yeah. And I'm just curious if your meditation practice helped you keep an even keel about it, or was it just so new and you were, if your emotions are based on your numbers on any given day, you were really tied into it so strongly.
It's a little of both. Like I interviewed Jerry Colonna, who's a business coach, but he's also an entrepreneur and a venture capital guy, and has done very well professionally, and has also dealt with a lot of his own. You've interviewed him too, I think.
You introduced us and we spoke, but I've not interviewed him.
I mean, he's somebody that's got a very strong like emotional and psychological life, and also business. And in my interview with him, he taught me a lot. He turned the tables on me, and I edited out what he said to me, but I learned.
You and the editing.
But what it was he said, why are you doing this business? And I said, well, our goal is to get 10 million more people around the world meditating in the next 3 years. We really want to have an impact. And he said, well, if that's your goal, why do you care if it's you or someone else? And I was like, oh, I just care. Care. I want it to be me. I want it to be us. But at the same time, I realized that like I can't hold tight to this business. I know that like I'm doing my life's work and I'm fulfilling my purpose in the world as I see it. I'm having an impact, and we get reviews from people all the time that say, I slept for the first time in 3 years, or I have the worst anxiety, and this has been like your app changed my life. Like things that sometimes I'm a little even surprised about, but it does make me feel good. So that was that idea of not holding too tight, holding your business to be too precious was a hard thing, because on the one hand, it's your business and you want to make it successful. On the other hand, if you look at your, the bigger picture, there's certain things that you can't control. And that, I think, was helpful to have my meditation and mindfulness practice to be able to deal with that.
What about
Do you think I can drink this safely?
Be careful. All right, everybody watch. Do you think about, this curiosity that you've had your whole life?
Tortured curiosity.
Okay, that's interesting that you say that, actually.
Well,
Joel and I talk about this all the time.
Are you tortured?
Well, we used to say it's a torture, but we've decided to reframe it. But that's a story for another day.
Oh, okay.
But you now you end up doing this podcast, and that's how I learned about you. And I started listening to your podcast. And not knowing a thing about you, I would have said that you've been doing this your whole life. You're that good.
I've been asking questions my whole life. I don't know that I've been interviewing.
Yeah. But you have this is my perspective, but I think many of your listeners would say the same thing. You have a strong ability to ask the right kind of questions, along with this voice that comes across in such a beautiful way when you're interviewing the guests. And I just feel like tied into you when you're interviewing. So I just thought, you're such a natural. And was that exciting to be able to start to take that on? And, aside from this app that you're building, you've got the podcast.
It was like a dream. That was totally like a dream for a couple of reasons. And you have said this to me too, for better or for worse, I have always asked people a lot of questions, and it has been in large part because of curiosity, and it has also been in part to deflect from myself and to learn from other people. So that part of it, being able to ask other people questions and to hear their stories, was felt like it was so natural. But it wasn't exactly natural, because the first couple of interviews I did, I felt like I was letting people tell their stories, but I wasn't keeping them focused. And there is something to that. I remember interviewing this one person, and she was sort of all over the place. And so, are you familiar? You're familiar with the Moth storytelling group? That's on NPR, and everybody tells 5-minute or 15-minute stories, and sometimes they're on a particular topic, but they're always very personal stories. And I have a friend that is a Moth coach. She goes into corporations and she trains people on how to tell their stories. So I asked her if she would do a couple of sessions with me to help me tell other people's stories, and what would be, what could I learn to be able to do that. So I think that, coupled with my crushing curiosity, has been so helpful for me. And it's still always, when you interview people, before I interview people, I will sit for a minute and say, please help me. I don't know. I'm not praying to anyone, but I'm just I'm please help me help them to tell their best story. Help me to make them feel comfortable and to be able to share with me what's important for them to share. And so I love doing it, and I love my guests, and it's also very helpful for me, because I can. So I have one of my nieces was dealing with anxiety. I think it was last year. So I called this doctor in New York, Dr. Anne-Marie Albano, who's written the book on children and anxiety, and she teaches at Columbia, and she's got a brilliant practice, and she has worked with Lena Dunham, who wrote Girls and produced it, and she's just amazing. And I did an interview with her where she taught me about children and anxiety and all the different kinds of anxiety. And so I was like, but other people need to know these things too.
Right.
But that's what happens. Something happens in life where you just have this giant question. And if you're paying attention, which is, again, for better or for worse, what mindfulness teaches us, if you're paying attention, then often you're going to ask the next question. What does this mean? And that's where a lot of our podcast guests and topics come from what does this mean? Why is this a certain way? How can we be happier, live more joyful lives? It's really amazing how many people deal with anxiety and stress and mood disorders, and how much some of these tools can have a dramatic impact. So I feel like, it's not just that meditation helps everything, because I don't feel that way. I feel it's one tool in the toolbox, but I do feel like there's a lot of these principles that come with mindfulness training and becoming more aware and training your brain that can be super helpful with all these crazy things that happen in our world.
Yeah. And your podcast brings that to the world for sure. I've learned a ton, even about topics that I didn't realize.
About.
No, I didn't think I did, but then I did.
Oh, okay.
Which is great. I always think that means it's hitting the mark.
Yeah.
I know this is going to be a tough question for you, but try your hardest.
Oh, no.
And you can't include me in the answer, even though I know you really want to.
Oh, my favorite guest?
Yeah, who was your favorite one or two guests?
You are my favorite.
Of course.
You're my favorite guest.
Yeah,
we'll
call me 1A, okay? Or 1Z.
Do you have a favorite guest, excluding me?
I love Rookie.
But you've still done how many, like 15?
Yeah.
But I mean, do you think you have a favorite?
I think I want more time to answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah, I need more time, but we'll answer that.
Well, I will.
But you have how many episodes? Do you even know how many?
We have like 130.
Because I was trying to go through and figure it out.
There's a lot.
It was a lot.
There's and I have had some guest interviewers, but I think I've done like 130 interviews, and I mean, I love a lot of them for different reasons. There's one of my favorite meditation teachers on the app I was telling you about Melly O'Brien, and she's the one on the app right now. She's got meditations called like Soothing Grief and Untangling Negative Thoughts, and her voice, and I love the Australian accent. I love New Zealand accent too. There's just something that's very melodic and wonderful about those accents, but her narrative in her meditations is just beautiful in these guided meditations. So I interviewed her, and between her voice and she's young. I mean, she's in her 30s, but her wisdom was so just beautiful. But she talks about very simple things like living your life more fully, feeling more deeply, and she does retreats on that. But I loved interviewing her for all of those reasons. Like, there are other people that I interview that I really love, like Rick Hansen, who does Hardwiring Your Brain for More Happiness, and then he did his second book about resilience, and I love interviewing him, but it's very sciencey, which is great. I tend to gravitate towards I love learning about that, but I love this sort of when your heart and mind and science and inspiration, where it all comes together, and it's like that's what fills me up. So I want someone to speak from their heart, and if they can.
Is there anyone that you interviewed where you thought, "Wow, I'm interviewing this person"?
Tim Ryan, Congressman Tim Ryan. Yeah. So I had interviewed Sharon Salzberg. She made me nervous, but for no reason. She made me nervous because she was at the retreat center in Lenox where she was doing a retreat, and the connection was horrible. And I almost had to stop her each time, having her repeat a word for going back and editing. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to use this podcast. I felt horrible, but I didn't want to keep stopping her. So that was terrible. But Tim Ryan, I was so nervous because there is an art. He's congressman from Youngstown, Ohio. And there's a true art to interviewing a politician, because they are trained to say what they're trained to say. And he did do some of that for sure. But I use Zoom, but I went into a professional recording studio to record him. And I was so nervous. I had all my notes. I'm in this little studio, and his assistant calls and says, do you mind if, he said he's running like an hour late. It might be 2 hours. Are you okay with that? And I'm like,
I'm just going to hang out in this studio.
well, I'm like, I'm going to hang out being nervous and sweating.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no problem. It's no problem. It turns out that he called me back 10 minutes later. He said, actually, he's walking back in now. I think we can get him into the studio. And we connected and he was like, hey, Patricia, how's it going? Like he made it so easy. He was actually did you interview him?
I wasn't able to speak with him, but
not
yes,
yet.
we interviewed via email is what ended up happening.
Yeah, I mean, he's
his
very...
Yeah.
Michael, his assistant.
I can't remember his name. He was a great guy,
yeah,
actually.
he's so great.
Yeah.
But I was really nervous. I kept thinking that he was going to be the next presidential candidate in 2020, and I psyched myself into being nervous about it. And it was a really good interview. I mean, he was great until like sort of the last 5 or 10 minutes when he went into his platform. And I really didn't want to stop him or challenge him on anything that he was saying. So, I mean, I wasn't as free I tried to be really free, but I was, it wasn't like I could be as free, but I was really nervous. And that was like, oh, wow, I'm so excited that he's wanting to be on our podcast.
Who would you like to interview?
Michelle Obama.
What steps have you taken to...
0.
What's the name of the
Will you
book?
help me?
Wishmaker?
Oh, Wishcraft.
Wishcraft. I'm sorry.
I like Wishmaker too.
I think there's a mountain out here.
Dreammaker. Yeah. She would be awesome to interview because she's a very grounded soul, and she says things like when she says when they go low, we go high. You know, those are mindfulness principles in a way. I mean, she's very. Some people are very. You don't always need to be trained in mindfulness or Buddhist principles or even spiritual principles or religious principles to have this sort of grounded energy. And I think she's got. I mean, I think she probably is religious, but I think she's also got a sense of grounding that I would be so curious where that came from.
Yeah.
And why?
Yeah.
Who's your reach?
Oh, I'm going to have to give more thought to that because I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm such a rookie with this, as everyone's noticing.
Hardly.
So,
you're awesome. I'm telling you, I have not talked about these things. I even have to tell my boyfriend because he doesn't even know half these things. I've just told you.
He'll get to know you a little bit better, I guess. So no, I'm out here. I'm talking, and I think that I'm trying not to think too much about things really right now in terms of who's going to be on my list or whatnot. I'm trying to allow things, which is a little bit unlike me, to sort of just fall into place.
Because you're a planner.
Yeah, I am by nature. So, for example, I'm doing a couple of interviews in Chicago next week, and luckily through my, the way I make my living through Image One, we have a little bit of a team, and they're helping me with all this, and so we need a space to do the interview, and so they keep asking me where are you going to do the interviews. And I said, we're going to figure it out. Don't worry about it. And, constantly, where are we going to do the interviews? And I don't know. I just, somehow I think I know a few people. I don't know. I'll make a call. I think something's going to work out. And they just keep going. And then something worked out today. So it's
good.
funny. I just feel like things will work out.
About it.
So I'm just kind of letting things flow with this, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, it's fun for you, obviously.
I am enjoying it.
Yeah.
Like you, I'm a curious person.
Yes, you are.
And okay, so but back to the app.
Yes.
Recently, you guys had a shift, and can you share what all happened?
In July, we were acquired by a Canadian company called Interaxon, and they're the makers of the Muse brain sensing device. Yeah. It's a little brain sensing device and app that is like an EEG that can measure your brain's response to it can give you feedback on your meditation practice. Yep. So they
and I'm going to have you keep talking because there's one over here, and I'm going to show it.
Go get that. Yeah. So they acquired us, and so now we have an office in Toronto, and we have an office in Denver. We're like real people. We still do a lot from our kitchens. But,
Yeah.
this is the
That's
Muse.
a modern, we were talking about modern families. That's a modern company.
We're a modern company for sure.
Yeah.
And my business partner, co-founder, Sid, is always going. She lives part-time in Holland, and she has a place in Denver, and she's in Toronto, and and I'm in New York, and so we're like wandering. She has a little place on the ranch she grew up in Nebraska. So we're on the move for sure.
Yeah.
But this is the Muse headset, and it has sensors inside of it.
Yeah.
And you put it on. I'm going to put it on, but I think it looks kind of goofy. But what happens is you put it on and you would connect it. An opportunity to fix my hair.
Like 79, I'm thinking.
There's no mirror or anything, people.
It's like the headband Jane Fonda.
Yeah, exactly. And you would put this into your app and you calibrate it so that the sensors fit your head properly. And then you'll meditate. It takes you through a guided meditation, and you can try it. And it gives you feedback on your meditation. It uses the weather as a metaphor for your energy.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
and
a
it's
little
got
crooked,
these
but that's
sensors.
okay. It's got the sensors right in there, and the sensors are sensing your brain. And so if you're meditating and you're focused, this works with focused attention. So you're focusing on your breath. And let's say you have some thoughts or a thought comes into your head that's very annoying, that triggers you, you will hear the weather getting thicker and thicker. So it's like storm waves. And then it reminds you to focus again on your breath. And so you'll focus on your breath, and you hear the storm getting lighter, lighter. Then you hear all these birds chirping. And when you're finished, you look at your dashboard and you can see and remember when you were having a thought that was annoying, or you got, like, often in meditation, we have this really funny cartoon that one of our illustrators did. On one half of it, it says meditation expectation with a bubble over it that says peace and love. And then on the other half, it's like meditation reality. Why did my boss say that? What time am I having dinner? I'm ready for my glass of wine. Like, what's the reality of all of that? And so with a Muse device kind of gives you that feedback. When you've got all that chatter going on, it reminds you that you've got that chatter with the weather metaphor and the weather sounds. Then you can take deep breaths again. You get back to your focused attention, and you hear the birds chirping and the weather kind of calm down. And so you can see that when you get your feedback on the dashboard. So it's a cool device.
Is it intended to be a long-term way that somebody might use it as a practice, or does it get you sort of in a rhythm so you start to notice better and then maybe not use it quite as much? Or
no, I think you can use it in a lot of different ways. And so if you are using it to learn, then it teaches you what happens in your psychology and physiology when you are, triggered, or you're having a lot of thoughts and emotions and sensations. And it helps you to train on this breath focus, which is so important in your meditation practice. You know this too, although you're quite an expert, but meditation's a practice. And so even when you get it, there's so much to learn, and there's a lot of going back to what we call a beginner's mind, right? To learn again and again. So I think what happens is you use it, maybe you put it aside and listen to guided meditations, or you do silent meditation on your own, or you use the Meditation Studio app where you can do guided meditations, unguided with music, unguided with sounds, but then maybe you want to see how you're doing again. So like a month later, a year later, you're going to put the headset on and you're going to see the difference in your dashboard. And so I think you really learn that it's a practice, and that you go up and down, and that meditation, like everything else in life, is imperfect. And that there's a lot to learn.
There's some other interesting things that they're doing. They have these glasses, and I know that they're utilizing them for athletes. So when you're actually out, say you're out running or trail running or whatnot, you wear these and it keeps track of the way your mind's going. And I don't really know all the particulars. I'm not sure
that's a little bit more for performance. And what's really interesting, because we have a whole performance collection on Meditation Studio. And we have this one teacher that has worked with, we have a lot of teachers that work with athletes, but one teacher who works with the Villanova basketball team and the football team, and she uses Muse in her teaching. We didn't know that when Muse acquired us, because she does these meditations called Fierce Focus and Visualize Success with them, with the teams also. And a large part of that whole performance thing is not getting like hooked on all the things that are going on in your head and being able to fully focus on. And I remember this because I used to play soccer, and I would get to the goal, and I was like a right wing, and I would get to the goal. I was like so fast, and I would be like, I'm at the goal, I'm going to kick the ball, and I would kick it and mess it up. I would get so nervous and so anxious. And I think a lot of athletes now, and this is, in part what they were trying to do with the headset too, a lot of athletes are really learning how this focused attention, focused concentration, and it's really helping with relieving some of that anxiety and angst that comes around having high expectations around performance. Yeah,
and also letting go of what they potentially didn't do or didn't perform on the last play, like you missed the goal. It's just like, let it go, move on. You're talented.
My gosh, what a good point. I mean, that goes back to like negative thoughts being like Velcro. Like if you mess something up.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, has that ever happened to you? That's like, I find that like the hardest thing. Where?
Where? Every other day.
Can you let go of it?
I'm learning.
Yeah.
It's a journey for me.
Gosh,
It's
absolutely. The hardest thing ever.
Yeah.
How long is it going to take for us to let go of stuff? Like, I'm really worried that I've been meditating for so many years and I'm still like hooked. I wrote this one article, like I host a podcast about meditation and I'm still a mess sometimes in parentheses. But, it's like, it does take time, and we all have some things that are harder than others. So how do you do that? How do you let go of something that really bothers you?
I think right now I'm at a point where it's just move forward. It's just move forward, learn, move forward, learn, move forward.
And you don't hang with that other thing?
Sometimes I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do. Oftentimes I'll remind myself this is going to be around for a little bit and just allow it. So instead of trying to push it away and getting frustrated, just allow it. In particular, whenever Joel and I butt heads on things and we get passionate, it really sticks with me. So
does that happen a lot, or?
It actually doesn't happen that much, and but that's been another journey of us working on these sorts of things with each other. But when it does, it hangs with me. Yeah. And so when I'm practicing, I just keep reminding myself, this is going to be around for a few days. So let it go. Inside, you can be frustrated, you can be upset, and let the story play out in your head. It's all that's all it is, and usually it subsides. And
how long does it take? Because when you say play the story,
it's 2 to 3 days.
Okay,
I've noticed.
But that's hard. Like I want to cut that time in like to be like a minute.
Yeah.
I want to be able to move on quickly, but I like really hang on to things too.
Yeah. Well, why do you want to cut it to a minute?
It disturbs me.
Yeah.
It disturbs my mojo. I like to be happy and positive, and some of these things that happen in life aren't all happy and positive, which,
that's the magic.
That's the magic.
Yeah, it is. I know. And that's the hard thing for, I think, all of us. We don't like the pain. And it does disrupt us, and we don't like being disrupted.
I know. So do you forget about it, or do you work on it? Because, there's this tool in our practice called RAIN, where you recognize it, acknowledge that it's there, investigate it, and then sort of not, make yourself not be attached to it.
That's what
is that what you do?
Work on.
That's what you work on.
For sure. Yeah. Is that
Tara does that.
Yeah.
I don't know if she started it. That's how I learned it.
Yeah,
Yes,
well,
I
you
learned
shared that with me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
good.
how I know it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I was using that method, but it's one that I think about.
Yeah.
And I just know, again, like with people like Joel or you and I were having a conversation last night about somebody and that I was frustrated about. But that was a me thing,
Yeah.
and I think I always try to, I want to bring it back to me as much as possible because it's really up to me how I feel.
And I think that's such an important thing for people to do. And the more self-aware you become, that's amazing. But I have had friends say to me, because I try to do that too, they're like, this is not all you. I'm always trying to see my part in something and my reaction to it. But there is a time where if you have an employee that's working for you that shouldn't be working for you, or there's certain things that you have to act on.
Yes.
And how do you decide what's that line? I think a lot of people wonder that, like that line between what is you? I mean, it's all you because it's you and your reaction, but when is it important to act on something versus but to have it be you're working with it in your practice?
I think I might be answering, but to me, you show up. And so that just because you're being with something or letting it go or trying to let it go doesn't mean you can't show up. So if we have a team member at the company and there's a problem, and so there's something that has to happen, that's the show up. That has to happen is a human conversation about what's going on,
right,
and how we're going to get on the same page, or how we might just choose to go down different paths in this life, which means I'm going to stay with the company and you're not, and maybe
right.
That's just a nice way of saying you're terminated or whatnot. But I do look at it as a human conversation. I mean, let's just be real about it. It's not working, and we either got to get it to work or part ways, and that's just a fact.
And how hard do you work? Like, I mean, I asked this question about personal relationships too. That was like another article that I wrote recently, and then interviewed this relationship expert. Like, how hard do you work on these things? Not just your personal, but your work relationships. When do you know when to say no more?
I think it's very situational. And that's the human part to it. Everybody's always looking for the playbook.
Yeah.
I really don't think there is a playbook per se. I think actually that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a playbook. And this is how you need to handle it. And there's so many dynamics.
Oh my gosh. And let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because there are so many dynamics and people do want a playbook. And there are people, and to me, it's people who are less self-aware. That's a little judgy. But that think they're already right about everything, and that's when you sort of butt heads with people.
So would you be saying somebody on the other side of the table, so to speak, feels like they're right, but you don't see it that way?
Yeah. I mean,
So
doesn't
you're
that
right.
happen? Right.
I don't know who's right.
I know. You never know who's
I always say,
really
look, unless it's obvious,
right.
You stole from the company, or
right.
You did something unethical. Those are the obvious things. The other things are just the stories we have in our heads.
Yeah.
And I have my story, you have your story, and I don't know that there's a right or a wrong. And I just happen to, in my particular case, I'm running the company, and I have a certain responsibility to, make the best decisions that I feel I can make, which doesn't mean they're always right.
Right.
To keep the culture the way it needs to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't make the right decision, and I got to be okay with that and learn from it and move on.
Right. Yeah.
So, but let's get back to.
I love your philosophy on that.
Let's get back to your acquisition.
Okay.
Because now you said it was July, and so it's been a few months. How's it going? And are you in a good place?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think it's great for our company because we have more sort of love and resources behind it, which is great. And the people that are part of the team at Muse in Toronto are great. It's a great group of people. And like you and I were saying, Canadians are really nice people. Not all Canadians.
Yeah.
Let's not go there. But they're just, this group of people is like, they're a great group of people. And I think they're really smart. And I love what they're doing with Muse. And I love what we're all trying to do to bring the businesses together. So it's definitely, there are things that, administrative things like filling out expense reports, things that when you're not part of a real company, like a company
small,
that already has
closely
formalized business systems, that annoy me and take time. And, but I love, I love having my plane tickets on that expense report. So I need to fill it out. So but I think it's been really, really good. And we're very early on in the process. So there's a lot of like creative thinking, and their leadership team is so personally committed to bringing meditation to more people and to helping people to understand why meditation works and the value of it. And so, I feel like we're mission aligned, we're heart aligned. They do have a lot of science people there, which is helpful for us as well. So, I think it's going really well. I think we were lucky.
Yeah. Well,
it's hard to compete in this business, and we're still, it's not like easy. It's very challenging to be out there building a business in a really competitive space like this. And I think it's really helped to be, have this partnership. They're a great strategic partner for us. So
I'm so happy for you guys. And Meditation Studio app is always the one that I recommend. There's a certain style to it, and the teachers, as you were mentioning earlier, they come from the heart in such a way you can tell the passion. It's just oozing through the app. Every piece of the app. So this is one that I always recommend. And another thing I was thinking about in getting ready for this is your journey. And I think about young women now, say in their 20s or they're in college, and they're looking, many people, millennials or younger, are looking for their purpose. And here you've kind of gone along on a journey and always positioned yourself and gotten yourself into a place in life that is really, really special. And what kind of advice would you give to a young woman based on all this wisdom that you've gathered?
A friend of mine just wrote a book about this. It's called The Myth of the Nice Girl, Achieving a Career You Love Without Becoming a Person That You Hate. And her name's Fran Hauser. And she articulated, we started actually like in 2009 thinking about this book that she should write, because she's an amazing leader. She was president of Time Inc.'s entertainment group, and a dear friend of mine. I worked with her at AOL. And so we spent a lot of time looking back at like what we would be telling. What do you tell people? And so she really articulated that in this book, and we created a collection of meditations on Meditation Studio with Chrissy Carter to also express those teachings. And so when you say like, what have I learned? Like we immersed ourselves so much in these 13 meditations that are in the leadership collection. It should be called Authentic Leadership, because it's about how to lead your life and in an organization with purpose and to be truly authentic. And so what I say to people is, first you have to be in alignment with your values, and that involves like reflection and purpose, understanding your purpose. But often you don't know what your values are until somebody like steps on them. And then you're like, okay, now I know what my values are. But in large part, it's also about finding your voice. We have these meditations too. One's called Finding Your Voice, one's called Aligning Your Values. But a lot of it is like what we do. You reflect and you listen to yourself, and you get to know your intuition and your heart and your mind, and your body often reacts to things before it even gets to your mind. And so I think you have to really pay attention to what's important to you. So I think that is really important. I don't think you can be driven by what people think or being validated by any external people, including your parents. I think it's really like finding that time to be reflective, to really understand what makes you happy. And sometimes, like, I think you can just mess up a lot in your 20s to have the experience that may or may not work for you. And then I do still feel like a lot of people feel like another person is going to be the answer, like find the love of your life in your 20s and you're set. And I think that that's lovely and that worked for you and it's worked for a lot of people, but I don't think it's the only thing. I think you often have to really know yourself. And I mean, I interviewed Kristen Neff, and she talks a lot about self-compassion, but Sharon Salzberg's book called Real Love is also very profound in that, a lot of what we need to do in life is to love ourselves and to start with really connecting with ourselves and then to bring that out to connect with others. So what I would say to a lot of young women is find a mentor, find people that you really respect to be able to bounce things off of as you go through this journey, because it's not always easy, and to spend whatever time you need to find what is real for you, not for other people. Yeah.
That's really beautiful advice. You have what you said to me not that long ago. You said, I'm going to my daughter's graduation in Halifax. And I said, you have a daughter. Oh. And I want to make sure, Samira? Samira. And so is this advice you would give to Samira? And can you tell us about Samira?
Well, Samira's a whole other story. So I think I mentioned that I had thought about adoption. And when I started thinking about adoption late in life, like it was like 15 or whatever years ago, I went to this adoption doctor. You can edit a lot of it if it's too long. But I went to this one of the top adoption doctors in the world in New York, and Angelina Jolie had used her for all of her kids and this and that. And I asked her about kids and what regions of the country. I was just doing some research, and she said, why don't you go with my filmmaker to Ethiopia? And you can travel with him and help him, and you can go to all these different orphanages and see how you feel. And so I went with this guy, Randy Bell. He and I went and took his video camera, and we went to all these different orphanages in and around Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And it was just like one of these things. It was almost like doing witchcraft again. It's like, well, I want to adopt. I think I want to adopt, but I'm nervous, and I don't know if I want a baby or an older child, and maybe I'll just, like, if I go to Ethiopia, someone will just hand me a child, and that will be my child, and I won't even have to think about it. Like, I was like, maybe this will just be easy. In a way, it turned out that way, but not exactly. So we went to all these orphanages, and we went to one that was like more like a foster home. There were 18 kids, and they were all between the ages of 10 and 18. They were all what were called double orphans. Both their parents had died, mostly of AIDS, and they all were HIV positive. And this one young Ethiopian woman had started this foster home or orphanage, and the kids weren't really up for adoption. But we walked in there, and they were the most amazing kids I'd ever, like, I just get chills even thinking about them, because I like fell in love with them from the moment I met them. And they had the worst things happen to them, like what they had witnessed at their young age made me so grateful, and also like it made me look at happiness in such a different way, because they would dance and play and interact with each other, and they were getting their medications, twice a day. There was still a lot of stigma 10, 12 years ago with HIV, and so they were on the HIV soccer team, and other kids were afraid to play with them, and there were a lot of things that were happening at the same time. But I fell in love with all these kids, and I just adopted the orphanage. And I started going back there every year, and I started raising money for them in New York with everybody. Everybody I knew adopted one of those kids, like fostered them. And nobody said no, really. Like, it was like, and my father, like, who at that time, like, he was conservative, whatever, and he was like, Samira was the person that he had sponsored. But everyone, like even my friends that didn't have a lot of money, like gave the money because it was like a family. Like I knew these kids so intimately, and they knew them. And I brought my best friend from New York and her 12-year-old daughter Lucy at the time, and that was like this experience. Lucy ended up writing her to get into her college. She wrote her essay about what she had experienced with these kids in Ethiopia, like for a 12-year-old kid to have that experience. But anyway, so I fell in love with all these kids. I went back once or twice a year and just hung with them, and they like filled my soul. And I would do yoga with them, and we would take them out for ice cream. Like they were awesome kids. And one of them was HIV positive and deaf. And she was one of the younger ones. And there was a group in Connecticut that wanted to sponsor a cochlear implant. And so the founder of the orphanage asked Samira if she would bring, and none of these kids had passports or visas or anything. So it was like always a miracle, like that this all ever happened. But Samira was like 15 at the time, and she ended up bringing over Megdis, the young one who was getting the cochlear implant. She brought her over, and Samira ended up living with me for a year in New York while a lot of things were happening. And she lived like on the floor of my living room, my New York apartment. Not the floor, on the and everything was just magic. Like we loved each other. The language, she didn't have good use of language, so she learned it from watching like sci-fi movies, and so her language was not perfect. But it turned out like crazy things happened. Like there was a woman 3 doors down from me in my apartment in New York who was a teacher, and I met her in the elevator, and I said, "Oh, what do you do?" And she said, "I'm a teacher." She said, "I'm an English as a second language teacher." I'm like, "Will you teach this child?" And she came to my apartment for 3 hours every morning. I found someone who sponsored her, like paid her $1,000 or whatever to teach Samira. And she came to my apartment every morning for 3 hours and helped Samira study for a year. Samira was supposed to be in 10th grade at the time. It's like the whole story is beautiful. My father fell in love with her. My whole family she's the most beautiful, heart-centered kid. And a lot of things were very difficult, obviously, but so she had to go back to Ethiopia, but we got her into college in Canada 5 years ago in Nova Scotia. And she studied in this very small, very white town and lived with these amazing people. And she ended up graduating this year, like after 5 years. Jeez. And we all raised money to get her through college. Like, I mean, she was such an it takes a village kind of person, and everybody loved her. And, so it was just like, so she is truly like my earth daughter. Like she's in Canada now living with her boyfriend, and she's an amazing child. And in a way, I don't have to give her this. She needs advice on a lot of things, but she's so soulful. Like, she could have died when she was 8, and she had some kind of crazy experience which made her want to live. Like, she almost died because her parents died, and all this stuff happened to her. And the kids created a business called Desta, and we ended up selling a lot of their products at our benefit for them in New York. But the Desta means happiness in Amharic. And they did all these T-shirts and things that just say "choose happiness," like that you have a choice. And that's like some. I know it was ridiculous, and I was like angsty about work and angsty about like why didn't I like have a baby or whatever like, and I'm like, people overcome such amazing things in this world, and they're still filled with so much love, and so she's my shining star, northern light. Like she's just. Like, she is so beautiful from the inside and out. I mean, she's really kind of amazing.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story.
Was it long?
No, it wasn't long at all. It was really magical.
Yeah, she's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a great, I mean, even when I came back from Ethiopia the first time, I remember going to this, like, a psychic. Someone said, just go ask if Samira's ever, like, it was my dream to have her come here and for her to have this life or a life that was, I thought, and we all thought, better than what she was living, and better healthcare and everything. And brought a picture of her, and I showed it to his guy, and he said, "Oh, she's definitely coming here." And I was like, "That's impossible. She's sick. She doesn't have a passport." He's like, "No, she's coming." I'm like, "Okay." Okay. I'm good with that.
Will she stay in Canada?
We're working on that now.
Okay.
She has to get permanent residency now that she's not a student.
Yeah.
So I hope so. She hopes so. But that's a lot of work.
Wow.
Yeah. But
Amazing.
she's overcome so much. So hopefully.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Love that story. All right. We could probably go on for another 2 hours.
I know. But
thank you so
people are
much
going to get so
for doing this.
bored with me.
No, not at all. Not at all.
You're the best.
I have a lot of gratitude to you because I reached out to you somewhere around 18 to 24 months ago, and I'd mentioned I'd read about you because I think I read about you because you were one of the top mindfulness people in the country. What was that? You're being humble.
No.
Yes, there's a list you're on, and that's how I think I got to know you, but maybe not. Whatever it was, I found you somehow, and I sent you a cold email, and I just told you what I was doing with this book, and I said I'd love to interview you. And of course, you were so kind, and took the time to.
But you're somebody that makes things happen. I don't think people. I have a sister-in-law that's like this too. I think there's certain people you just never say no to. Do you have people in your life like that? You're like that person.
Oh, really?
You
That's
and my
nice
sister-in-law
to hear.
Emily. Yes, you guys are like you do not say no to Rob.
Well, thank you for not saying no to this. It means the world to me.
Well, thank you.
And
for having
I haven't
me.
known you that long, but I feel like I've known you for a lifetime in some ways.
Oh.
And so even just,
Yeah, I feel like
I mean,
that too.
I was thinking about it before we had dinner last night, and I thought, I really have only seen you in person like 1 or 2 times, I think. Maybe just once, I think. We had dinner
At
in
the
Fort
vegan
Collins.
restaurant.
Yeah, right, of course. But yet I felt like I've seen you many times. So you're
Because
just
we
one
go
of those
deep.
people.
We go like you ask great questions, and you have this amazing curiosity about human beings, which I think is such a gift.
Well, you have the same thing. You do too. So thank you for doing
You're
this,
welcome.
Patricia.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
Yay. Hug.